They expelled me in front of the entire class. No warning, no chance to defend myself, just my name shouted by the principal, a few cold words, and a sea of eyes watching me fall apart. My English teacher smirked and said, "You'll never make it anywhere, kid." That sentence burned itself into my brain. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just stood there, humiliated, and quietly promised myself one thing: I'll come back. And when I do, they'll know exactly who I became. Back then, I was just the quiet kid no one noticed. Not a star athlete, not the funny guy, just the kid who sat in the back and turned in his work on time. In that school, silence meant weakness. Teachers thought I was lazy, students thought I was weird, and everyone treated me like I didn't belong. Before we go deeper, if you love true stories about revenge, redemption, and proving people wrong, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Trust me, this one gets wild. Anyway, that day started like every other. I walked into class early, sat in my usual seat, and hoped to survive the hour. Mrs. Dalton, our English teacher, had a reputation. She didn't yell, she humiliated. She'd read bad essays out loud to make everyone laugh. That day, she chose mine. It was about growing up with my mom working two jobs just to keep the lights on. She read one line, paused, and said, "Well, at least your grammar's better than your life choices." The class roared. I sat there, heat crawling up my neck, trying not to show how much it hurt. 2 days later, someone slipped a cruel note into her desk, mocking her. I didn't even know about it until I was called to the principal's office. "We know it was you," he said. No proof, no explanation, just guilt handed to me because I was the quiet one. Mrs. Dalton stood in the corner with that same smug look, and I realized something that day. Some people don't want the truth. They just want someone to blame. When I walked back to class to get my backpack, the room fell silent. Then the whispers started. Guess he finally snapped. Figures, he's weird. Even the ones I thought were friends just looked away. That moment, that silence filled with judgment. It broke something inside me. That night, my mom came home from work, exhausted. I told her everything. She didn't yell or cry. She just hugged me and said, "Then you prove them wrong." I didn't know it yet, but that line would change my life. Being suspended gave me time, something I'd never had before. I started repairing old laptops, watching coding tutorials, learning how businesses worked. Every late night in front of that flickering screen felt like I was clawing my way out of the hole they buried me in. Every success, a fixed computer, a new client, rebuilt a piece of the confidence they destroyed. I wasn't planning revenge back then. I just wanted to survive. But deep down, the image of that classroom, that laughter, that smirk, it never left. It became fuel. And somewhere between exhaustion and obsession, a quiet thought began to form. What if I came back one day, not as the broken kid they threw out, but as the man who owned the whole damn building? They didn't know it yet, but that day they didn't just break me. They built my reason to rise. You never forget the moment your dignity gets taken from you. It doesn't matter how old you are, the feeling burns itself into you like a scar you can't wash off. My last day in that classroom was the day I stopped believing adults always know best. After the fake incident with Mrs. Dalton's note, the principal decided to make an example out of me. He called an emergency assembly, not for the whole school, just for my class. Said it was about accountability. That word still makes my stomach twist. What it really meant was public humiliation disguised as a lesson. When I walked in, every desk faced forward and the principal stood by the whiteboard like some kind of judge. Mrs. Dalton stood beside him, her arms crossed, chin high. He cleared his throat and said, "Sometimes students need to learn that actions have consequences." Then he called my name. I remember the feeling and the heat in my neck, my palms sweating, my heart pounding like I'd run a mile. I had no idea what he was planning until he handed me a piece of paper. On it was a short apology speech he'd written for me. He told me to read it aloud to the class. It started with, I'm sorry for being disrespectful, and I take full responsibility for my behavior. My throat went dry. I looked at the paper, then at the faces staring back at me. A few people were already snickering. My best friend, or the guy I thought was my best friend, wouldn't even meet my eyes. I wanted to speak, to say the truth, but every word got stuck somewhere between my chest and my tongue. The principal's stare told me what would happen if I refused. Suspension would become expulsion. And for my mom, already working herself to exhaustion, that would break her heart. So I read it, word for word. My voice shook, but I made it through the last line. I will work to be a better student and respect my teachers from now on. The room was silent for a second, then someone laughed. One quiet snort, then another. And soon the sound of 30 people laughing filled the room like a cruel applause. I folded the paper, handed it back, and turned to walk out. That's when Mrs. Dalton said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "See, sometimes failure is the best teacher." Laughter again. A few desks banged as kids joked. I didn't look back. I just walked. But I heard it. That sound of sneakers squeaking, chairs moving, whispers following me down the hall. Every step away from that room felt heavier, but also sharper, like something inside me had started to harden. When I reached the front doors, I stopped. My reflection in the glass looked pale, angry, and nothing like me. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt awake. I knew I couldn't fight back. Not then. But I made a quiet promise, right there, hand on the door, heart pounding. One day, I'll come back. Not to beg, not to prove, but to own. That thought wasn't about revenge in the ugly sense. It was about control. About taking back what they'd stripped from me. Dignity, confidence, voice. That was the day I stopped being the quiet kid. That was the day I decided I'd build something no one could ever take away again. Though I didn't know it yet, that promise would shape every move I made for the next 10 years. The week after I left school felt like a slow motion free fall. I woke up every morning without an alarm, but the silence wasn't peace. It was shame. My friends had moved on, my teacher stopped calling, and every time I passed the school bus on its route, it felt like it was mocking me. Mom tried to stay positive. She'd leave notes on the fridge before her double shifts. Little things like, keep your head up, or, you're smarter than they know. But even her handwriting looked tired. I could see it in her eyes. She wanted to believe everything would work out, but neither of us had a plan. Then one night, the power went out. Just another unpaid bill. We sat in the dark with candles on the table, and for the first time, she said it out loud. Maybe you should look for work just until we figure this out. It hit me harder than she meant it to. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I realized she didn't believe school would ever take me back. That night, after she fell asleep, I went online using my old laptop. The Wi-Fi barely worked, but it was enough. I typed how to make money online, that cliche everyone starts with. Most of what I found was junk, scams, or nonsense, but one thing caught my eye: a forum where people helped each other fix broken electronics. One guy was selling refurbished laptops for decent money. The next day, I took apart the old computer that had been sitting in our closet for years. I had no idea what I was doing. I just followed a YouTube tutorial step by step. 2 hours later, the screen flickered to life. The rush I felt in that moment was insane. For the first time in months, I didn't feel useless. Within a week, I was scavenging old electronics from garage sales and repair shops. I'd clean them, fix what I could, sell them cheap online. The profits were small, a few bucks here and there, but every sale felt like revenge in slow motion. Not against people, but against the version of me they said would never succeed. I spent every night hunched over that desk, soldering parts, burning my fingers, and watching business lectures on another screen. I started keeping notes, not on grades or essays, but on strategies: how to price, how to brand, how to build trust. While my classmates were worrying about prom, I was building something real, A skill, a system, a new version of myself. Still, there were nights I'd lie awake and hear that voice. Mrs. Dalton's cold tone saying, "You'll never make it." Sometimes it still got to me, but now instead of breaking me, it pushed me harder. Every doubt became fuel. 3 months in, I made my first $1,000. I remember sliding the cash across the kitchen table to my mom. She looked at it like it couldn't be real. Then she looked at me, and for the first time since that horrible day, she smiled. Really smiled. "Looks like they were wrong," she said. That night, I didn't feel like a failure anymore. I wasn't a dropout. I was a beginner. And deep down, I started to understand something powerful. I didn't need their approval, their grades, or their system. All I needed was time, focus, and that burning memory of laughter in a classroom, the sound that started it all. By the time I turned 18, I wasn't just fixing laptops. I was running a small repair hustle from our garage. Word spread fast. Neighbors, classmates, even teachers from other schools started dropping off their devices. I'd stay up all night with a soldering iron in one hand and a cup of cheap coffee in the other, watching business videos to keep myself awake. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had control over something. That's when Ryan came back into my life. He was the same guy who'd laughed during my apology speech. Back then, I'd called him a friend. He showed up one afternoon, driving his dad's car, all smiles and nostalgia. "Man, I heard you're killing it with computers," he said. "I've got ideas, bro. We could scale this thing." I should have known better, but the truth is, I wanted to believe someone finally saw potential in me. We started working together. He'd handle clients, and I'd do repairs. For a while, it worked. Orders doubled, money started coming in. We even talked about renting a small space downtown. Then one morning, everything crashed. A regular customer called, furious. Her laptop was gone. She said she'd paid Ryan a week ago and never got her order back. I checked our records, no payment, no pickup. Then another complaint came in, and another. Within hours, I realized he'd been taking cash behind my back, lying to customers, and pocketing the money. When I confronted him, he didn't even look sorry. He laughed. "Relax, man, it's just business. You wouldn't even have clients if it weren't for me." That sentence hit harder than I expected. I didn't yell. I just stood there, staring at the guy I once trusted, realizing I was looking at a mirror image of every teacher, every classmate who'd underestimated me. He walked out that day, took my client list with him. I sat in the garage for hours staring at the empty workbench. My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from disappointment. I'd built something out of nothing, and once again, someone had tried to strip it away. But here's the thing about losing everything twice. The second time, it doesn't destroy you. It teaches you. That night, instead of sulking, I went to my desk and started learning about business law, trademarks, and contracts. I wasn't going to be the quiet kid who got taken advantage of again. Within a month, I had my business officially registered. I rebranded, built a new website, and wrote a clear refund policy. Something Ryan never bothered with. The same customers he lied to? I refunded every single one. It nearly wiped out my savings, but it bought something more valuable: trust. And it worked. The same people came back, this time with their friends. Orders doubled again. Except now, it was all mine. I never saw Ryan after that, though rumors said his tech startup didn't last long. I didn't care. He taught me my first real lesson in business. Not everyone who smiles wants to see you win. I went to bed that night exhausted but stronger. My hands were covered in grease and scratches, my mind racing with ideas. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I was focused. Because now I understood what power really was. Not money, not revenge, but the ability to build something they couldn't take from you. And I wasn't done building, not even close. Success doesn't happen like a light switch. It's more like a slow burn that suddenly catches fire. For 2 years, I kept my head down and worked. The garage became a small lab of wires, circuit boards, and empty coffee cups. My clothes smelled like solder and burnt plastic, but I didn't care. Every repair, every late night project, every mistake, it was all adding up to something bigger. That something started with a single question from a client. She ran a small shop downtown and asked if I could make her computer system talk to her sales register. At the time, I didn't even know what that meant, but I figured it out. I wrote a small script that synced her sales data automatically. A week later, she told me it saved her hours every night. Then she paid me double what I charged. That one job changed everything. If I could automate her store, maybe I could do it for others. So I spent months building a simple program, one that helped small businesses track their inventory and sales automatically. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I called it TrackSmart. I launched it quietly online with no expectations. At first, a few local stores signed up. Then a small chain of bakeries bought 10 licenses. I couldn't believe it. I was making more in a month than my mom had made in 3. I hired 2 part-timers, both kids from rough backgrounds like mine. We worked out of that same garage, now packed with laptops and empty takeout boxes. Every order notification that pinged my inbox felt like proof that I'd escaped the version of myself they'd tried to define. But success isn't just money, it's exposure. And that's where things got complicated. One day, an article popped up online. Local teen developer creates smart business software. It was flattering until the last line. He says he was inspired after being expelled from his high school for disciplinary reasons. I froze. Someone had connected the dots. Within hours, the old rumors resurfaced. My inbox filled with messages, some supportive, some cruel. But one message hit harder than the rest. It was from my old principal. Glad to see you turn things around. Maybe that suspension was what you needed. I stared at that line for a long time. He still thought he'd made me, that I was his lesson. The arrogance of it made my blood run cold. But instead of replying, I archived the message. Because now I finally had something more powerful than words: leverage. TrackSmart grew fast. Within 6 months, I had investors calling. I incorporated the company and moved into an office. The first time I signed payroll checks, my hands trembled. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was leading. Still, at night, when the office was quiet and the glow of the city hit my window, I'd think back to that classroom, that laughter, that humiliation. I didn't want revenge out of anger anymore. I wanted justice through success. And as fate would have it, that opportunity was closer than I ever imagined. 3 years after launching TrackSmart, my life didn't look anything like the one they predicted for me. I had a real office, a small team, and clients in multiple states. My mom finally quit her second job. We'd made it, or at least I thought we had. But success has a strange way of digging up the past. It started one Monday morning when my assistant, Clara, handed me a local news clipping. "Thought you'd find this interesting," she said. The headline hit me like a punch. Lincoln High School faces budget crisis. Building may be sold to private investors. Lincoln High, my old school, the same one that threw me out like trash. I stared at the article, reading every word twice. Apparently, the district had been drowning in debt for years. Mismanaged funds, neglected repairs, falling enrollment. The building itself was falling apart. They were desperate for a buyer. For a moment, I just sat there, the room buzzing around me. Clara's voice faded into the background. My mind was already somewhere else. Back in those halls, back in that classroom. I could almost hear Mrs. Dalton's voice again. "You'll never make it anywhere, kid." Except now, I wasn't that kid anymore. That night, I drove by the school for the first time in nearly a decade. It was smaller than I remembered. The paint cracked, the field overgrown. The front sign still read, "Home of the Lions," though half the letters had fallen. Off. I parked across the street and watched as a few teachers left the building, carrying boxes. I recognized one of them, Mrs. Dalton. Same walk, same sharp expression, only older, slower, tired. For a moment, I expected her to look my way, but she didn't. She got in her car and drove off, never knowing who was sitting just a few feet away. I sat there for a long time, the engine running, trying to figure out what exactly I wanted. Revenge? Closure? Maybe both. But what I really wanted was to rewrite the story, to turn the same walls that once broke me into something that built others up. So I started digging. Through public records, I found the sale notice. The district needed a fast buyer. They were accepting offers through a private bidding process. I could afford it, but doing it under my name would be too obvious. Too easy. I didn't want attention. Not yet. I called a lawyer friend and formed a new holding company, one that had no link to me or TrackSmart. The goal wasn't just to buy the school, it was to own the narrative. Over the next few weeks, I gathered everything I could about Lincoln High: financial reports, teacher rosters, inspection records. What I found didn't surprise me. Years of ignored complaints, questionable spending, and the same principal still sitting comfortably in his office. The man who humiliated me was still in charge, until hopefully I wasn't just a ghost from the past. As I closed my laptop that night, something clicked inside me. This wasn't about payback anymore. It was about justice through success, about building something better on the ruins of their arrogance. I looked at the empty screen, smiled, and whispered to myself, "You wanted to teach me a lesson, Principal Carter? Fine. Here's mine." The bidding process opened in 2 weeks, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly how it would end. When I decided to buy Lincoln High, I knew I couldn't rush it. This wasn't about showing off, it was about precision. I wanted to play the same game they'd played with me, but by the rules, and win it clean. The first step was information. Power in business and in revenge always starts there. My new holding company, Iron Vale Investments, officially existed on paper. No public links to me, no digital footprints leading back to TrackSmart. I hired an accounting firm to evaluate potential educational properties and quietly requested access to Lincoln High's financials. Bureaucracy did the rest. Within a week, I had everything: budget sheets, repair logs, internal audits. What I found made my blood run cold. The school had been bleeding money for years, thousands spent on consulting that led nowhere, maintenance invoices with no signatures, even grants that mysteriously vanished. And the same names kept showing up: Principal Carter and a few familiar teachers, including Mrs. Dalton. They hadn't changed. They'd just gotten better at hiding it. But I wasn't after exposure, that's not yet. I wanted to hit them where it really hurt, the one place that could never be denied: ownership. While my lawyers worked out the bid, I started preparing the second part of my plan: a full rebranding of the building once the sale went through. I didn't want it to stay a school. I wanted to turn it into something new: a tech and innovation hub for students who didn't fit the perfect student mold. The quiet ones, the outcasts, the dreamers. The kind of place I could have thrived in. At night, I'd drive by Lincoln High, park across the street, and watch the lights turn off one by one. Some nights, I'd see janitors leaving, others just the faint glow of the principal's office window. I'd picture him in there, probably thinking he still ran everything, unaware that the foundation under his feet was already cracking. One evening, I saw Mrs. Dalton leaving late, her car trunk full of old papers. She looked thinner, paler, maybe worn down by time, maybe guilt. But I didn't feel pity. I felt closure inching closer, one quiet heartbeat at a time. The day before submitting my offer, my lawyer called. "There's competition," he said. "A few firms are interested, one's from out of state. It could get expensive." I smiled. Let them spend. We're not losing this. When the bids opened, I didn't attend in person. My representative did, sitting among the suits and real estate developers. Each bid went higher, the tension building. Then, in the final round, we dropped a number no one could match. Backed by cash, clean, ready to close immediately. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, the call came. Iron Vale Investments has officially won the bid for the Lincoln High property. For a few seconds, I just sat there in silence, staring at the wall. I'd imagined this moment for years, but living it was different. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet. The same kind of quiet they once mocked me for. I'd done it. Legally, professionally, completely under the radar. And yet, the victory wasn't complete. Not yet. The paperwork would soon make the sale public. And when it did, names would surface. That's when they would finally see mine. But before that, I had one more move to make. One last twist to ensure they never forgot the lesson I was about to teach. The night before the announcement felt heavier than any meeting or deal I'd ever made. The documents were signed, the sale finalized, and the world would know in less than 24 hours. For the first time in 10 years, Lincoln High wasn't a school. It was mine. But ownership alone wasn't the point. The point was what came next. I spent that night in my office, surrounded by blueprints, renderings, and legal drafts. On the wall behind me hung a massive board with the new logo, the Link Center. Learn, innovate, create. The name was no accident. It still carried the echo of Lincoln, but now it meant something new. Something built for the people they'd ignored. The plan was simple on paper, but ambitious in scale. The building would be transformed into a tech education hub. Free workshops for teens, scholarships for low-income students, small business incubators for local entrepreneurs. But the heart of it, the real message, was written into the mission statement. For every student who was ever told they weren't enough. I stared at those words for a long time, because deep down, I knew that sentence was mine. Outside my office window, the city hummed quietly. Somewhere across town, the old principal was probably packing up his things, preparing for the district's official transfer ceremony. He had no idea who the buyer was. That was the beauty of it. The patience, the silence, the build-up to a single moment that would rewrite everything. Around midnight, Clara walked in with 2 coffees. "Can you even sleep?" she asked. "Not tonight," I said, smiling. She looked at the plans on the desk. "You've been working toward this longer than I've known you. Are you nervous?" I shook my head. "Not nervous, just ready." She nodded, and for a while we just sat in silence, the kind that feels like electricity before a storm. Before she left, she turned at the door. "You could have just donated money, you know. You didn't have to buy the whole place." I laughed quietly. "You don't understand. This isn't about the building. It's about the echo. I want them to walk by it every day and remember." When she left, I pulled out the old suspension letter from my drawer, the one I'd kept all these years. The paper had yellowed, but the words were still clear. Failure to demonstrate respect and accountability. I folded it carefully, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote on the front, "Return to sender." Then I placed it in the folder that would be handed to the school's administration at the ceremony, along with the deed and the press release. I wanted the principal to find it after the cameras stopped rolling. A quiet message between us. No anger, no insult, just closure. As dawn broke, I looked at the reflection of my office window. The same tired face that once stared at those glass doors of Lincoln High years ago. Only now it wasn't a boy's face anymore. Tomorrow wasn't revenge. It was redemption. And they would finally see what silence can build. The morning of the reveal felt like standing at the edge of a decade-long dream. Quiet, surreal, and heavier than I'd imagined. The district had organized a formal press event to announce the sale. Local reporters, teachers, and former students were invited. None of them knew who the new owner was yet. I arrived early. The school looked the same, but smaller, weaker, like time had drained it of the arrogance it once had. The banners were faded, The flagpole rusted. The smell of the old gym still lingered faintly in the air. For a moment, walking down those halls again made my chest tighten. The memories were sharp. Laughter, whispers, humiliation. But they couldn't touch me anymore. When I reached the auditorium, the chairs were lined neatly, the stage set for the district officials. Principal Carter stood near the podium, still carrying himself like a man in control. Mrs. Dalton sat in the second row, flipping through papers, pretending not to notice me as I walked in. She didn't recognize me. Not yet. As people took their seats, the district's spokesperson stepped up. "We're here today to celebrate a new chapter for Lincoln High," she said brightly. "The building has officially been purchased by a private investor who plans to transform it into an innovation and education center." Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward. "And now," she continued, "it's my pleasure to introduce the new owner of this property, Mr. Daniel Hayes." It was my cue. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked to the stage. The sound of my shoes against the old linoleum echoed like a drum beat. When I turned to face the crowd, I saw it. Confusion, curiosity, and then, slowly, recognition. Carter's face froze. Mrs. Dalton's pen slipped from her hand. "Some of you might remember me," I began. My voice was calm, steady. "Years ago, I was a student here. I didn't exactly leave on good terms." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But this building taught me something. Not through its lessons, but through its failures. It taught me that sometimes silence can be power, and sometimes being underestimated is the best motivation you can get. The room was dead quiet. The camera zoomed in. I continued, "Today, I am proud to say this place will have a second life. The Link Center will give opportunities to kids who don't fit the system, the ones who learn differently, dream differently, or just need someone to believe in them." I could feel Carter's eyes burning into me, but I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. This wasn't about revenge. It was about showing him what success without cruelty looked like. As the applause started, soft at first, then stronger, I stepped aside for the official signing. The moment the final document was stamped, the building was mine. Legally, symbolically, completely. Mrs. Dalton stood as if to leave, her face pale. For a second, our eyes met. There was no anger in mine, just finality. She nodded slightly like she understood. Maybe deep down she'd learned something too. After the ceremony, I walked outside alone. The autumn air was cool, the sky clear. Across the lawn, a group of students were taking selfies under the school sign. One of them pointed to the banner reading "Link Center, coming soon." I smiled. 10 years ago, I'd left this place broken and silent. Today, I walked out owning the silence and everything that came with it. It's strange how life circles back. 10 years ago, I walked out of Lincoln High with nothing. No diploma, no confidence, no belief in myself. Now, every morning, I walk through those same doors holding a key card that reads, "Director the Link Center." The halls that once echoed with laughter at my expense now hum with energy, ideas, and hope. The renovation took a full year. We stripped the walls, repainted the classrooms, replaced every broken chair and flickering light. But I didn't erase everything. Some parts, like the old library doors and the faded trophy cases I kept, they were scars of the past, reminders of how far we'd come. The Link Center opened with programs for kids who'd been overlooked, students who didn't fit the traditional path, who struggled like I once did. We offered mentorships, coding labs, art studios, startup boot camps. Every week I'd meet kids who reminded me of myself, quiet, misunderstood, but burning inside with potential no one had seen yet. One afternoon, a mother came up to me after a workshop. Her son had just presented his first project. She said, "Thank you for seeing something in him. His teachers never did." That moment hit me harder than any business success ever could. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about meaning. Eventually, word got around. Local papers called the Link Center A model of modern education. Former teachers came to visit, some to congratulate, others just to see if the rumors were true. Even Mrs. Dalton showed up once. She looked smaller somehow, worn by time. She thanked me, genuinely, for what I'd done with the place. I didn't say much, just smiled and told her she was welcome any time. That was all the closure I needed. As for Principal Carter, he never reached out. He retired quietly soon after the sale. Sometimes I wonder if he ever realized what that moment in the auditorium really meant. Not humiliation, not payback, but evolution. I won't pretend everything's perfect now. Success doesn't erase pain, it just gives it purpose. But every time I see one of our students stand on that same stage I once stood on, confident and proud, I know I made the right choice. My story isn't about revenge, it's about turning humiliation into power, pain into purpose, and silence into success. Looking back, I sometimes ask myself, did I do the right thing? Was buying the school the justice I was looking for? Or just closure for the boy I used to be? What do you think? Did I make the right move? What would you have done if you were in my place? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss more powerful true stories like this one. Drop a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell me, have you ever proven someone wrong who once doubted you?